I don't know that behavioral change can happen without a big dose of self-awareness around how we contribute through the way we think and through the way we feel.
Hello and welcome. I'm Holger and my guest today in the Days of Change podcast is Peter Gardiner-Harding. We'll talk about play, actually about theater play, and how this can be used as an instrument for change. And probably we'll talk about a very interesting life and what life brings along. And maybe if we are in the mood, we might even talk about the big change maker, about God, because this is a topic Peter is related to much more than I. So let's see where we end. I'm open to all avenues for this conversation. But before we start, just for those of you who are new to the Days of Change podcast, in this show, I'm chatting with people who I've met along my way as a facilitator of transformation processes. Specifically, those people all showed up either at the Berlin or Toronto Change Days, which are annual festivals, change festivals at which a global community of change makers gathers to learn and network together. It's my passion. When curating a podcast episode, I'm looking at facilitators who have a specific mission, which they follow and into which I can inquire. Our topics range from individual and personal change via effective teamwork. Last week, we talked about change in the fashion industry, transformation of entire organizations, everything, you have it. And even the society as a whole. Yeah, we are all naive change makers, world changers. We really want to be the world a better place, and we try to contribute to that. So every change journey is different, and as a consequence, I devote the first 20 minutes of this show to the personal life and the path of my guests, and I'm sure I'll get a lot of interesting things out of my guest today. Let me introduce Peter. We met last year in Toronto at the Toronto Change Days, and he joins us today from Toronto. And I think it was the first time you attended, Peter, wasn't it?
Correct, yes. This was my first Change Days.
Let's talk about your experience towards the end of the show.
Okay.
If you look at Peter's LinkedIn profile, there are exactly two positions he held over the last 32 years. He was a manager for business planning at a bank in the 1980s. And since 1989, he is executive director and corporate actor. His company is called Plays That Work. And what they do is providing experiential learning opportunities to their clients. Peter impressed me in Toronto with a, how shall I say, a carefully crafted scenario, which inspired a couple of learning experience among the people who attended his workshop. I will talk about that in the show. And I was impressed by the intensity of Peter and his charisma. So Peter, as I said, joins us from Toronto, where I have so many wonderful friends now. Hey, Peter, I'm happy that we found the time to chat. Thanks for being on my show.
You're welcome, Holger. I'm pleased to be here as well. Thank you.
Peter, what is most important for you in life and in work?
I would say that connecting with other people is the thing that is the most important thing for me in my life and in my work.
Reminds me of one thing I very often do in my workshops, particularly if it's about relationships, about work relationships. I ask participants at the beginning a question, which is when they have to introduce themselves in the first 5 or 10 minutes. I ask them, think about a nightmare relationship you once had at work and think about a dream relationship you once had at work, and describe them each with one word or a few words. Can we play that game with you now? So if you think about one nightmare relationship you once had, how would you describe that in a few words?
Stilted. I would say that it was based on values that neither one of the two of us shared. I'm fortunate enough to say that I haven't had many nightmare relationships in my career. The people that I have met have, for the most part, been absolutely wonderful to work with. The one person that I'm thinking about right now, the word I would use to describe our relationship would be stilted.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm just reflecting as you're talking, because I had a few nightmare relationships, but if I think about now, let's say with an adult eye, I know that I was part of the nightmare, not only the other person.
For sure. Yeah, I would agree with that too. When I say stilted, I'm reflecting on the values that neither one of us was really living our values in the relationship that we had, and the systems that were around us at the time were forcing behavior in us that neither one of us was really proud of. And I have some regrets around that relationship. I wasn't able to reconcile with him about what went on, and it was a very valuable lesson for me, though, because I was able to learn that if I can contribute to the values underpinning relationships, I stand a much better chance of avoiding that happening again.
Right. And the dream relationship?
Oh, the dream relationship. I'm thinking of the woman who opened up Canadian banking for me at Plays That Work, and is I refer to her as being client zero in my practice, because the things that she allowed for in terms of the experimentation in the early years of Plays That Work were very formative and contributed a great deal to the work that we're doing today. And it wasn't a completely neutral experience for her either, because she was taking reputational risk by agreeing to have this, relatively this then young guy come in with all of these wild ideas around how he could use story to help her people learn. And she stood with me in that sphere of unknowing, not knowing what I was going to do or how it was going to turn out, but nonetheless stood there with me and allowed me to grow and learn as I was going.
Wow, what a great story. Let's come back to client number 0 later on. I would like really to take our listeners on a little tour, as I usually do with all my guests, and find out a little bit about your life. Just sketch it out a little bit. And I know a bit about it because there is a chapter in a book by a guy called John Spade, and it's about how to believe. And it describes your experiences in your teenage. And I know there were some hard experiences, and we don't want to go too deep into it, but you grew up in Montreal. Let's start with that, yes?
Yes, I did, yeah.
And you had a passion for the theater early on, right? I
did, yes.
Did you play at school? Did you have drama classes, or what was that?
Absolutely. It was all extracurricular. I like to say that I had the benefit of being raised in a family that did not affirm my creative side, but the tolerance for me to be involved in theater and things artistic were encouraged, as long as they were around the real job that I had, which was to get to establish myself well in some kind of a profession that would generate revenue for me. It's not atypical. I think I may share this story with many people, but my parents had this notion that there are things that we do to support ourselves in life, and there are things that we do to support our interests outside of that. And they wanted to make sure that I was well established otherwise before supporting the stuff that I was able to create. And actually that paid off big time, because by the time I was in my mid-20s, I was the 4th living chartered accountant in my family. And that proved to be very beneficial for me when I finally became a performer full time, because the conversations I was able to have with people in business were familiar to them. They weren't afraid of me. They weren't concerned that I would not get them.
Yeah. That's important. Yeah. I learned that over the years that the more you speak the language, the more you understand the client's language, the closer
Exactly.
you can get and the more you can relate. Yeah.
Yes.
With 17, you went through a traumatic experience, and we don't want to go deeper into it because you said that, of course, it formed your life, but it doesn't inform your life any longer now. You suddenly had a burden to shoulder because your parents died in a car accident. But what happened? What happened then after 17? So your parents died. You had, I think, a younger brother, and what did you do?
A younger sister, yes. Well, we endeavored to reside with first my mother's sister and her family, and then my father's sister and her family. And neither of these situations really worked for us. So within 2 years, we were on our own, and I was able to get custody of my younger sister, and the two of us were living by ourselves in Toronto. It was a formative time for both of us as well. She was still in high school, and I was starting university at the time. Ultimately, I dropped out of
Mhm.
school for about 5 years, but I did return back to school in my mid-20s to get my business degree and then to become a chartered accountant.
So you didn't follow the theater career. You went to the bank. You became a manager. How long were you in that business?
Just about 5 years. Well, actually, and while I was going to university, I was working part-time at the university, at the bank as well. So I guess in total it would have been about 8 years.
And I know there was also a period when you intended to become a priest. When was that? Um,
Well, by that point, I was married and I had a young child. I was considering becoming a priest, in my mid-30s, I guess. It would have been about 35, 36. Again, I went back to university on a part-time basis to study for a while inside a seminary. And that was another period of time that was very forming for me. I learned a great deal about myself. And I think it was really at that time that I began to really grieve the loss of my parents and to do the work that I needed to do to be able to, become fully myself. You may know that when people have trauma like that, they tend to, well, at least what I did was I shut it down. I started to uber perform. I was I had a younger sister to raise, and so I just got to the business of doing it and holding back and suppressing a lot of how I was feeling. So it was during the time of my mid-30s when I began processing all of that, which brought me back to my pathway with God. And I thought for a while that would be where I was going, but it was really in seminary that I realized and affirmed to myself that this performance desire for me was really it. And I made the move into theater.
So, wow, a lot of threads to follow. I'll drop the thread untended to talk about your Christian faith for a moment. Let's see if we still have time at the end. We might pick it up again. But how did the transition happen? So you were at the bank, you went to this Christian college,
Yes.
but then you decided to pursue a kind of theater career. How did that happen?
I was also running a financial counseling business for people who had been let go from various, positions that they had. So I had a fairly constant stream of income from that small practice. So by day, I was counseling people with their finances, and by night, I was looking for scene study and audition techniques training wherever I could get it inside the theater community in Toronto. And then I began to get work as an actor. So I worked fairly steadily in the early 90s. Each year, I think 1994, I did 6 plays in the year, which was a lot of work to be undertaking in addition to, managing that small practice.
So were that kind of off-Broadway theaters
Oh,
productions?
yes. Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
I carry a tap on my key ring, which represents the first professional engagement that I had, which was within about 6 months of myself declaring myself as being an actor. I got my first paid gig, but believe me, I didn't make enough to really pay the light bills.
I can imagine, yeah. So how did you get to client number 0? So how did you make the decision to offer your new skills, your concepts to business?
Well, you probably understand this as well, Holger, that that theater is a lot less about pretending, and it's a lot more about fulsomely being yourself inside the characters that you're being called upon to play. And I realized when I learned this, that I needed to do my own work to be able to do my craft, to perform my craft well. And further to that, coming to the realization that I had lived a lot of my life in a business context and understood the drama that exists inside all life, not just business life, but all life, but especially including business life, and realize that most people don't necessarily acknowledge or credit the fact that there is drama there. I began to wonder how I might be able to bring that awareness, the awareness that drama is informing of life in business, as well as offer people in business an opportunity to explore what that drama is for the purposes of making them better at what they do. And if not necessarily better, happier and more engaged, more aligned with what's there, and possibly, improve the outcomes, both on a practical level as well as a financial level, as well as a felt experience level. So I didn't really understand at that point exactly what I wanted to do with it, but it began to germinate in me that what I was doing now as an actor had some value inside a business context. And that's where Client 0 came in, a woman by the name of Linda White, who was just recently retired from Scotiabank as the vice president of global learning for that organization. She was the one who, when I began to talk to her about what I thought I could do, I remember that first day, she just started nodding her head, and she was getting it, even though it wasn't something that either one of us could really conceive of and draw lines around and describe fulsomely. It was really more conceptual than exact.
What I'm understanding, and let me just replay that, is that you basically didn't have any role model for what you were intending to do. I mean, nowadays there are trillions of groups working
Yes.
with theater and business in different ways.
Yes.
I use improv theater, for example. I mean, the whole work of Keith Johnson obviously has moved so much into business, and there are other ways of using drama and theater. But it sounds like you had no role model. There was nobody around you who did already what you were trying to do.
Yes, that I agree with that statement. Yes. There were plenty of people who were offering opportunities for people to learn and practice skills. And to be honest with you, that's how Plays That Work actually began. And oftentimes still begins with organizations who don't fulsomely get what we do. We begin our work with new organizations under the premise of giving their people an opportunity to practice using some skills. If we want them to coach better, if we want them to sell better, if we want them to serve customers differently or stakeholders, if we want them to govern better, then give them an opportunity to learn some skills and then practice them in some kind of a simulated environment. The work that really interests me and the work that we shared when we were at Toronto Change Days really didn't revolve around skills so much as awareness of self in a story and to become clear on some of the mindsets that we have, the emotional engagement that we have can dramatically affect the outcomes that we get. And when we begin to realize that our mindset, our humanity in the story is as much a gift as well as a barrier that we need to either overcome or leverage, that's hugely empowering to people.
Is that what you did from the beginning with client number one? I think Linda was her name. Or what did you do at that time?
No, we began exploring skill development and skill practice. And
For example, which kind of skills?
the very first engagement that we did was one where bank employees and wealth bank employees were coming together to explore how they might be able to work together to their mutual advantage with their shared client base. And that entailed them, first of all, understanding each other, what was endeavoring to undertake, and look for synergies between the two of them with clients that they might have. Now, understand that some of them in the room would see each other as competitors as opposed to, colleagues in this endeavor, because, if the bank, for example, were to have a customer with X number of dollars and they were to move that money into the wealth bank, then they would actually lose some business. Mm-hmm. So, culturally it sounded good, but practically there were a whole bunch of stakes that were involved that everyone needed to contend with if they were expecting any kind of behavioral shift to happen.
What did you practically do with them at that time?
We began with a number of different business cases that we animated. We performed what we called simulations right from the very beginning, where we would come in as the clients, and the participants would have to deal with us as themselves, whether they came through the wealth bank or whether they came through the retail bank. And then we would reflect on the skills that they undertook together with the clients and how they landed on the client.
Now that sounds very much like a role play, like many consultants do. Also, I do role plays. What was the specific angle of an actor to that, and what did you bring in additionally as an experienced actor? What probably a normal business consultant trainer wouldn't probably see with their eyes?
Well, the first thing that I'll say to that is that we try to help our clients understand, Holger, that role-playing, it implies that everybody who's involved in the activity is playing a role. And when we do our simulations, we're very clear with our clients and with the people in the room that we're not expecting anybody to do any acting other than ourselves. In this particular example, we were acting as the clients, and we had a robust script and a scenario that was going on in the lives of these people. They, on the other hand, the participants, they come into this kind of human learning lab as themselves. They're not playing a role, they're playing themselves. The only thing that they may be suspending disbelief around is that the actor in front of them is a real client. We make sure that that is clear to learners as well as clear in the design that we undertake, because nobody really learns much unless they can align whatever they're doing in these simulations with something that they do in their lives. So we do all the acting. The participants engage either using the skills that they've just been taught or otherwise, and then the reflection happens fulsomely and meaningfully for them, because they can reflect on the choices that they make within a story that feels real for them.
So how has your methodology widened and broadened since? Do you still apply the same methodology, or have you altered it or widened? What do you do nowadays with your clients?
Yes. The performance of the simulations are largely unchanged. The simulations themselves, the experience that the participant has, is pretty standard. What's changed over time is the degree of and participants' willingness to explore themselves in the experience. In the early days, we were looking strictly at skills and commentary around skills, but today the exploration of the felt experience of both the character as well as the participant is really where the majority of the learning happens. We know that we are resonating with participants when we hear things from them like, I've been doing this for years now, and I've been trying to get a certain outcome, and I'm always puzzled as to why I don't get the outcome that I'm looking for. But now I have an understanding of how maybe I'm contributing to the outcome that I'm getting, and if I make a different choice, then I can get a different and a better outcome. When we start hearing that from participants, we know that we're hitting something that is meaningful for them, and that it's something that they can act on, that they can, now that they've increased their awareness around themselves. The types of things that they might be saying are, when I have a problem employee, I can't let go of the fact that I see them as being a problem. And to the extent that I continue to see them as being the problem, I'm not opening up to the possibility for them to change. So how might I be able to change in my outlook and conception of them to be able to be in service more effectively of them and their change?
How do you craft and design and develop the scenarios? Is it that when you go to a bank, you have a bank scenario? If you go to a hospital, you have a hospital scenario. If you go to a school, you have a school scenario. Or do you fertilize different industries with different scenarios? How do you do that?
Part of when we begin with a new client and ongoing is we have dialogue with our client around some of the stories that live within their culture. Especially those stories where the pathologies exist. So whatever we do has to be recognizable by the participants. They have to be able to recognize and see that what we're doing belongs to them, that they can relate to it. So some, like the hospital story that you saw at Toronto Change Days, is a pretty universal story within healthcare. So from one hospital to another, there may be some application there. On the other hand, there may be some unique things that are going on inside of one client that doesn't happen in another. So we have to make sure that whatever stories we do choose to play are going to be recognizable by the participants, and we adapt them accordingly. After 20 odd years in this business, Holger, I would say that I'm not creating stories from the ground up every single time. There are certain themes that seem to come through, but they need to be massaged so that they feel like they live within the cultural context of the participants. And so we'll adapt according to that more often than not.
Right, Peter. Usually what I like to do in my podcast is to give a little simulation. So I had a couple of podcasts where people coached me. Last time I talked with Kelly, who you also met at the Toronto Change Days, about choice of my attire. Maybe we can do a little simulation. Maybe you can throw me into a situation where I have to play a certain role just for a couple of minutes, and then let's see what's happened. Do you have an idea?
I do, yes. I play a character. His name is Eric, and he is a board member for a toy company, a toy manufacturing company, and he's only been 6 months on the board. Initially, the board was excited to get him involved. He's an owner-operator of a biomedical organization. He's well regarded in the community as a business leader, and he agreed to be on the board of this small company because he wants to develop his skills ongoing as he matures to become a board member for hire going forward. 6 months later, the board is a little concerned about some of the behaviors that Eric is demonstrating. He tends to be quite a bully when he engages with people, and right now he and the CEO of this organization are at loggerheads. And you, as Holger, are the board chair. Last night there was a meeting held where my character Eric and the CEO got to blows over a marketing plan that the CEO was bringing forward to try to change the product mix that the company was undertaking. Many of the board members, including yourself, are really concerned about this kind of aberrant behavior that showed up last night between my character Eric and the CEO. and you've asked me to a meeting. There's a monologue that is performed by Eric, which is designed to provoke some of the felt responses that we're looking for within our learners, for them to create and to deal with. So if you'd like, I'll deliver that monologue
Please.
to you, and then after that you can engage in a dialogue with me about what you're concerned about.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, to me, it's pretty simple. You want to sit at the top of somebody else's company, you deliver. You work out your strategy, you negotiate your mandate with your board, you get out there and you do it. No this way, no that way, no excuses. You just get out there and do it. I started my company from an idea. I read one doctoral thesis in pharmacology every week until I met Grant Miller. Now, Grant Miller is a young guy who had something. He discovered a way to help diabetics live without the fear of blindness and amputation. Now, I want you to think about that. It's pretty heavy stuff. So he developed Sucrabol, and now me, as the CEO of Diabetech, it's my job to make sure that the people who need it get it. And believe me, you don't do that by playing nice. There's a lot at stake. Health protection branch, the regulators, other pharma, these guys will do anything they can to cut you out. Diabetes is a $0.5 billion industry in Canada alone. So if you want to get something done, you get out there and you do it. Otherwise, you pick up your marbles and you go home. Now, I'm not at all surprised that the chair has called a meeting for me this morning. What happened last night was disgraceful. I'd have been ashamed of myself if I was showing up in front of my board the way that Philip did last night. And if this exemplifies the kind of behavior that he demonstrates and the kind of analysis that he puts into these projects, this company is in a lot of trouble. We have got a lot to talk about.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks for coming, and thanks for reflecting on what happened yesterday. I share with you the concern that yesterday evening's meeting didn't really go as we all have hoped and all have expected. So I think it's a good opportunity for the two of us to talk. Don't you think so?
I agree. I have major concerns around what is going on in that corner office, Holger. I think we've got a huge issue.
And you made your point very clear, Eric. Yesterday and now. Let's postpone that point a little bit, because I might have some different opinions on part of what you said, but I share also some of your concerns. I would like to know first from you. What's important for you now in your relationship with the board and with the CEO? How do you see your position in the weeks and months to come?
Well, I'm more focused on the here and now at this stage of the game, Holger.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have a problem with a CEO who's gone somewhat renegade. Mm-hmm. We need to to talk to him about, first of all, the robustness of board packages that we get, the information that we're being given, and his expectation around what it is that the board is there to do. Because the questions that we come up with are meaningful and they need answers. And when he doesn't have answers to these questions, that puts us in a position of not being able to do for him what he wants. Yeah. So, I don't know what it was like before I came along, but it seems to me that his relationship with the board as a whole is something that we should as a board be talking about, because I don't want to have what happened last night happen again.
No, and I totally agree with you. I don't want to have that happen again, Eric. And we really have to talk about style and culture in the organization. I see that you can come from a very different business sector. You come from a very different size of companies. This company has worked, they have earned their market share for a while, and obviously they have, or we have, established a totally different way of dealing with each other and dealing with conflicts here. So the question is, I'm not saying that our way of dealing with conflicts is the only one or is the right one, but I'm saying there is a problem of relationship, as you said.
I have a few opinions on that.
Okay, so go ahead.
Yeah, well, I would suggest to you that we as a group at the board aren't dealing well with conflict. I believe that we have a problem when we have divergent points of view.
And I think you're right. And I think we have to deal with that. The question is, how do we do that? And are you willing also to question your own role and your own behavior in that game?
Okay, so if I feel that my behavior last night was totally appropriate. I think I had some questions that were, albeit quite difficult for him to answer, but I think it was reasonable for me to expect to get answers. And when I didn't get answers, that's a huge red flag for me that something is wrong.
I agree with you that some of the questions you asked are appropriate. I disagree with that the style and the tone of how you dealt with that was appropriate. Okay, can we stop here, Peter? Otherwise, it's getting too long. Thank you. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Okay, now go ahead with your questions. I need to breathe a little bit. Yeah. That was quite a situation.
Okay, so the way we would go into reflection at this point, Holger, is I would come back into the conversation as Peter. I would take Eric out of the equation and then ask you to, first of all, reflect on what you did well.
Well, I think what I did well was, first of all, I listened to Eric. I didn't go into a position right away, but I thought about myself. What are the points where he might be right? He might be wrong in the way he's dealing with conflict, but he might or might not be right in the issue of the business.
Yeah. Yes. So my response to you on that score was, when you did look for points of alignment,
exactly,
I felt hopeful. I felt that hopefully that the conversation we were going to have would lead to some outcomes that would be tangible for me. And I don't know if you noticed this, but every time that I responded to those moments of you trying to find alignment, I offered you more. Right?
Exactly.
I would you more.
Yeah.
Like another moment for me that was magical was a did well moment was when I interjected and I said I had some opinions on those. You let go of everything otherwise that were going, and you went straight to the energy that came from me. Again, at that stage of the game, I felt alignment with you. And alignment feels collegial. It feels like not necessarily that you were in agreement with me, but that you were standing beside me as opposed to opposite me.
Of course, this can also be a trap. Yeah, I mean, I had the feeling at a certain point I might move myself into a trap. obviously what I did is trying to get alignment. Yeah, that's what I've learned. That's what I'm teaching in my conversation courses. So, but of course it can be also a trap, because I wanted to reestablish trust with Eric, but I didn't want him to think that I'm totally on his side, and that I condone what he did the evening before, his behavior. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting for me that you're saying that, because you demonstrated that you had the courage to be able to hold those two together, right? Allowing your curiosity to expand your understanding of my position is not it's not tacit agreement. It's not demonstrating that just by you letting me speak this way is giving that power. Typically, many of the participants, especially the participants who are themselves very much like Eric, will go toe to toe with them,
right?
And the arguments escalate, right?
Yeah.
And we will hear from them. I can't let him say this. I can't let the conversation go too far down that road. Well, there may be an opportunity there for them to learn that they can do that without, as I say, tacit agreement actually being implied.
All right.
Because you did find a place to be able to say later in the conversation where you didn't necessarily agree with me full.
Yeah, and I waited for the right opportunity to say that. Right. Okay. Thank you very much. That was very informative. Maybe a concluding question. What's your theory on behavioral change? I think you kind of touched that point already earlier in our conversation. How does behavioral change happen, and what do you support with your way of working with people?
I don't know that behavioral change can happen without a big dose of self-awareness around how we contribute through the way we think and through the way we feel in our lives. It just can't happen without that. When we think about all of the activity in the world around climate change and a need for us to take action in ourselves, we can't do that until we can empathize and align with the way we are with it and what's blocking ourselves before we can start to look over at the other and do the same thing. So,
but you must meet a lot of people. At least I meet some people in the work I'm doing. People who, it's mainly men, but sometimes also women. I don't want to gender type too much, but it's in particularly men who just refuse to, at least overtly, to look into themselves. Maybe they do tacitly without saying so, but then they play a good game. But we meet so many people who either they pretend or they have no insight into their self, into the dark corners, into the blind area of themselves. You must meet such people. So what do you do with them?
Oh, wow. Continue to invite them in. It really, you can become very sad and disconsolate, I think, if you look at the political discourse that's happening around the world right now. My goodness, it would make you, at least sometimes I wonder if we stand a chance at all with, the way people intractably hold on to positions with no willingness or consciousness to see how they might be contributing, to, I don't know, just keep leaning in and keep inviting people in. It's just that's the only way forward.
We're coming closely to the end, and I still have that in mind, because obviously the Christian faith influenced your thinking, at least at a certain time. I'm not quite sure about today a lot. I mean, you are talking to a hard-nosed atheist, and the older I get, the more atheistic I get, because I think there's just the skull and the brain inside and nothing else. But I had a period of faith very in my early life. So in what you just said, and maybe let's connect what you just said with the situation of the world. How does God come in, and what does God actually mean to you? Let's make it simple.
As a spiritual man who does follow a Christian path, I look around at my brothers and sisters who are part of all of Christendom, and we have so many different flavors of Christianity that it can be so hard to hope for the church, the larger church, on any level, to become aligned. I don't believe that I have all of the answers, Holger. And when I meet somebody,
so.
Yeah, well, when I meet somebody like you who said I was there and now I'm not, I understand that too, right? God is around me, and is a conversation that I have inside of myself on a daily basis. I try to live it on a moment-to-moment basis, but at least for some designated time each day, I try to have conversation with God, which is really just shutting myself down as much as I possibly can to allow God to speak to me.
So is it a conversation with yourself? Maybe?
I don't really know the answer to that question, and I don't know that that's important to me. What I do know is that when I stop the internal dialogue that's going on constantly in my mind and try to empty myself, problems get solved, or ways forward appear, or at least peacefulness around struggles that I may be having start to take form. I like that way of life. I like that it's a very productive way to be. And the Christian story is an important story for me because I'm steeped in it, and the practices of this are something that are well known for me, and they support me in this emptying of myself to dialogue with God. So
I can understand that. I can understand that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah. All right. Thank you for going into that, Peter.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Last point, we met at the Toronto Change Days, and as I said at the beginning, all the people I interviewed have either been at the Berlin or the Toronto Change Days.
Yes.
That was your first time, and just a few words, how would you describe your experience?
I was very surprised. I was the reason why I found out about you was one of my colleagues in the theater world found the Toronto Change Days information and passed it along, and suggested that I might use this as a way to develop some business. And that's what led to me finding a way to have the actors come out and perform the story, the play that they played, that you saw. So it was all really more about business development. That was the initial impetus for me to go. And what I found was a community of people who were searchers. They were seekers. I made some connections with a few people, and have since been in dialogue with some of the people that I met, and realized it was more than just about business development. It was around, exploring that God discussion that we were just talking about a few moments ago. And I found myself exploring that more during that weekend, and I wasn't expecting to. I appreciated the ability to come together in community with other people who were also seeking, and to have dialogue with them about what that journey looks like for them and how they can align with other people in their pursuits. It was a very interesting time.
Thank you for that nice and warm description of what we are trying to do. There are so many perspectives, and
yes,
I'm happy that you enjoyed it. Peter, thanks a lot. That was an entertaining hour. I liked our play, and I'd like to play more with you. I like theater, as I said, and thanks for that hour. I really appreciate that you came to my show.
You're welcome, Holger. Thank you very much for asking me. I really appreciate it, and I'm privileged to be here. Thank you.